stitching a padded seat in, I would make a double where it come back to the where the at the beginning of the cantle, where the cantle binding went underneath the seat. When I come back to there, I always made an extra stitch on both sides, and I don't know why I did it. That's the way when I started learning. That's the way that somebody taught me, and so they wanted to know why. They just couldn't figure out why I put that extra stitch there. And I told them, I said, that's just the way I was taught. I said, I've never really thought about why it was there or questioned it at all. That's just something I did. But I did know that the reason behind it was to make it a little bit more stronger right there. I don't know why, but that was the purpose behind it, because there's really no stress right there. But I got later where I didn't do that anymore, and but they was curious about why I put that extra stitch in. One of the people I met while at the Congress was Herb, and I've got his card. It's got his last name on it, but I don't know that I ever really knew what Herb's last name was. He makes belts. He's makes a lot of ostrich belts, lizard belts, uh, belts with skins on them that match boots. He did some carving, had some tool belts, but his big thing was silver. He wasn't a silver worker, but he was a silver designer. Uh, he would sit down with a customer and draw out a belt, a buckle, uh, to fit their needs or their wants. I mean, he'd sit there and draw it out, and it would, the design on it, the scrolls, uh, if it had a, a reining horse on it, if it had a halter horse, if it had a cutter, roper, it didn't matter. He sat there and drew it out. And for some time, Vogt made his silver for him. He would design it, send them the drawings, and they would make it and send it back, and he would deliver it to the customer. Um, Later on, he got away from Vogt for some reason, and I think he had one or two guys that did work for him, and then he ended up with the guy he's got now, and he's been with him now for a good while. He's in New Mexico. Herb does just like he did with Vogt. He sends in the design and he does it. And they do some beautiful work. Man, they really do some real good silver work. Beautiful buckles. A lot of them are given. He makes a lot of trophy buckles for different classes, different rodeo stuff, horse shows. He's really an artist. He really is. He's got a booth at the Congress and has had for, I know, at least 25 years, because I've known him that long. And he had been around the horse shows selling this stuff long before that, and been to Congress long before that. Um, while I was at Rod's that time, um, a young man come in, and he was in high school. He was wanting to get into a work program. The school would lay him off at noon, out of school at noon, and he would work of an evening. And so he wanted to do leather work. So we we took him on, and I let him do. He covered stirrups. He did a lot of different stuff. He never did learn to tool. I never did teach him to tool. He didn't seem to be interested in tooling, but just working with leather. And so he did stirrups. He did. I think he made some headstalls. He made flank cinches. A lot of the odds and ends stuff that really helped me. Rick only had one eye. He had poked one of them out. I mean, he could not see out of it. He poked something in it, and he couldn't see anything out of that eye. And so he was real protective of the other eye. And doing covering stirrups, he would pull the string through with a pair of pliers. And he would get a hold of them and pull. And one day I looked over, and he had turned the pliers around, and he had them this way, and the jaws sticking down, and he was pulling like that, and the handle was sticking up through his hand, and he was pulling that away, and it was pulling towards his face. And I hollered at him. I told him, I said, Rick, don't do that. I said, if you slip, you're liable to poke yourself in the face. And so he quit. And he wasn't a week later. He was still working on some stirrups. One day he said, don't you have anything to do except stirrups? And I said, well, right now we don't. Well, I don't want to do no more stirrups. I said, well, do you want to work? Oh, yeah. Well, do stirrups, because that's all I got. But he was getting sick of stirrups. And I don't blame him. I didn't like to cover stirrups that much either. But anyway, he did slip. And them pliers was sticking up about an inch out of his hand. And he did that, and it poked him right in the eye. One of the handles did. Oh, it scared that boy. Oh, man, it scared him. We rushed him to the hospital, and they fiddled with him a little while, and finally told him, says, you sure are lucky. Said, you went right beside that eyeball and didn't even scratch it hardly. Said it bruised it a little bit, but says it's fine. You're not going to, it's going to be sore, and your vision may be a little blurry, a little bit occasionally, but says there's no permanent damage done to it. And oh man, you talking about a happy boy? He was happy. He was sure scared that he had ruined his other eye, and man, I hurt for him. It was something else. You just don't realize, you got one eye, and do something to it, that's it. You got two, well, you got a little chance left. Rick worked for us all that summer, and Rick was a good worker, and he had talent. The things that he was interested in, he was good. He would get good at it, and finally he got real good at was stirrups, even though he didn't really like them. But he got real good with stirrups, and the other strap goods he did. He got to where he was good with it, and I think that that's about the time that school was out. I think is about the time that we moved back to Texas. So I lost track of Rick for a little while. He got into belts, strap goods, and did pretty good. He went around to the shows. He'd go and set up a booth at a lot of the horse shows, and he got interested in silver. And I'm not real sure when he got interested in it, but the next thing I heard, he had been in Fort Worth, down in the exchange building, where the stockyards exchange building, and that's where all of the the people that bought and sold cattle, their offices was in the exchange building, and there was a huge area right in the middle of the building on the first floor where they had some little commercial stores. Uh, Wendy Ryan started there with hats, and that's where he got started selling. Was in the exchange building selling hats, and so Rick had a little shop in there doing silver work, and I never did know he was there, so I didn't get a chance to go and visit him. Then he moved on to California and got pretty big in it. Uh, he wholesaled a lot, and he got big enough that he come back to the Congress, started coming back to the Congress each year and putting up a booth. And boy, he had some beautiful silver. I don't think Herb did some beautiful work, but I think Rick was up there close to him. Um, I'm not sure how much of it Rick did, but he hired people to do silver work for him. Uh, you really can't do enough yourself to do wholesale work, and that's what he was doing, some wholesale and some retail too. He even had a booth at the national finals in Oklahoma City, and he had a truck that he sent all over the country. Um, had a young man and that would take the truck and then hire one, or if they needed help, they'd hire one or two local people to help them with the booth. And this young man traveled all over the country with that trailer. And you can't do that if you're not making any money. You can't keep on spending it like that if you're not making anything. But Rick did good. He I think got married after he got out in California. Um, last time I saw him, he had a small child, about I guess a year and a half old. Haven't saw him since. He quit coming to the Congress, and I'm not sure why, but he saw fit not to come anymore. But Rick is doing good. He's a nice young man. Of course, he's not a young man anymore. His folks lives in Columbus, so he comes back to Columbus occasionally. Oh, back when I was working on the Hereford Ranch in Weatherford, Texas, I piddled with leather work, and we had met this man. He had um, a propane and butane business. Uh, he sold propane and butane. And so we got to know him there. We bought propane from him and got to know him and his wife, and we visited some back and forth. And come find out, he had worked for Leddy Brothers in Fort Worth doing strap work. He didn't try to build any saddles. He didn't try to tool them. He just did strap work for them. And from what I remember, he worked for him 2-3 years. And So he decided he wanted me to make him a saddle. Well, I made a little room. There was a little room down in the barn that had been used as an office at one time. So I kind of scattered things around and where I could work down there, and I built him a saddle. Took me about 3 or 4 months, but just working on it now and then. I built it for him and took it to him, and he thought it was good. He didn't ride. Uh, he didn't even have a horse, I don't think, but he wanted a saddle. And he had two grandchildren, two girl grandchildren. And well, when they got old enough to ride and get a horse, well, he let them use that saddle. And I was in Mineral Wells, Texas. This has been a few years after that. And I was the announcer at this rodeo. And this young lady come up the steps to the where I was at, and she said, "You probably don't know me," but said, "I'm Mr. Chadwell's granddaughter," and said, "I just want you to know that he give me that saddle you made," and said, "I'm still riding it and I wouldn't take for it." So that was good to hear. And that saddle had to be 10 years old at that time.